Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process and for authors to learn valuable tips on producing and marketing your audiobooks. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to focus in this episode on integrating the different phases of audiobooks: production, distribution, and marketing. And not just audiobooks, but we'll also include podcasting as a component, partly of marketing and partly of production. So let's jump in. I know one of the first concerns that many authors come to this larger conversation with is around budget. And not every author has the kind of budget that will really effectively be able to move forward with this larger picture strategic plan. But it's really important to understand that having or being able to put together a budget to make this larger plan work will actually improve your return on your investment. Now, when you do a full approach like this, it does involve more money spent at the front end. What it does deliver, though, typically, and should deliver, is that you get that return on your investment and much more. So there's a exponentially larger reward if you can find the funds to do this integrated approach and to do it well. So let's talk about how you can do it well and what that integrated approach looks like. First, let's talk a little bit about some of the pieces, and then we'll talk about how they can fit together. So some of the pieces that we're going to cover are, first of all, audiobook production. Now, in many of my episodes, I talk about pre-production, and I talk about how we can actually leverage your audiobook in order to generate more of an ongoing engagement with your listener. This is an important part of the process. It is a part of the process that, as far as I am aware, no other audiobook producers do aside from us at Pro Audio Voices, where we're really focused on how the end result, that final audiobook product, is going to be working for you in your big picture, helping you achieve your big goal, whatever that might be. Most often, what we hear from authors is that it's reaching a wider audience and trying to get the message, the content, the story out there to reach more people. That typically is the biggest goal that authors have. So as we're looking at a manuscript in pre-production, we're looking at that big goal and thinking about how can we leverage this material, this audiobook, to be able to move closer to or achieve that goal. Always aiming to achieve it, right? So for this aspect of the production of the audiobook specifically, we're looking at things just as an example of like a bonus interview, where at the end of the audiobook, the author is interviewed. Part of that interview is saved, and then there's an invitation to the listener to come hear the full interview on the author's website. What does that do? It gets your listener, who is already poised, typically, and ready to connect with the author, and it gets them over to your website so that they can learn more about what you have to offer and sign up for your email newsletter and all those kinds of things, right? Maybe you have some products or services that you offer. They'll learn about those by going to your website. There was a study done by Goodreads that indicated that the number one thing that readers want to do at the end of reading a book is to connect with the author. So as we think about audiobooks, we want to think about that relationship. And as we're in pre-production, planning out the kinds of things that we can do to build that relationship, to engage that listener beyond the point of listening to the whole audiobook. These become really valuable pieces of the puzzle. Another thing that can be a part of that preparation is thinking about what's going to happen in the overall marketing plan beyond production. So, for example, we might decide that there are certain clips that we would like from the audio that are going to make really great social media posts. That's something that when we plan it in advance, it becomes much more efficient process, therefore typically costing a little less. We may also be planning out that all or part, depending on the book, we may want to release all or part of it as a podcast, as a serial podcast. Or we may want to be utilizing some elements of the audiobook that are going to be a part of a podcast. If we're going to release the whole book as an audiobook, or even just say the first part or something, we'll want to map that out as well during pre-production so that we have the appropriate materials, assets at the end of production because we planned ahead. It's generally more costly to go back later and say, oh, and let's do this other thing. Then we have to, re-engage the team to take on tasks that they could have done more efficiently if we had planned ahead. Next, let's talk a little bit about distribution of the audiobook. And then we're actually going to turn and come back to production, but we'll talk about podcast production. When we're talking about distribution of the audiobook, I feel like it's important to be in as many channels as you can be because people look for their audiobooks in all different places. We want your audiobook to be wherever people might be looking for it. And so important, we want you as an author to have the tools, the marketing tools that are going to be used later on, and the high amount of royalties so that you're getting that return on investment that we talked about earlier. We want you to have a platform that's going to support you in those ways. And you're going to want that platform to be able to provide you with your customer information so that you can be building that community, connecting with your customers in a way that all the other standard retail platforms do not allow. And that platform is Amplify Audiobooks. Having your audiobook on Amplify Audiobooks gives you a tremendous amount of power that you just don't have anywhere else. And we're going to utilize that in some of the other components that we're going to talk about further into this episode. Now let's come back to podcasting. Podcasting is very popular, and it's a great marketing tool. It's a way that you can share your content, build your audience, and it's also a place where you can start to use those tools that you have on Amplify Audiobooks to, for example, run a promotion, or even better, because podcast episodes may be listened to outside of the promotional time frame that you create. You can use discount codes. So if you have listeners for your podcast, you can give them a special deal when they get your audiobook on Amplify Audiobooks. You can also use clips from your podcast to use on social media. Once you've done your podcast, then you can take clips from that podcast to help promote the podcast episode which helps promote your audiobook. And hopefully you're starting to see how some of these components, this integrated approach, can work, and why having the many different parts of it working together can make such a difference. Now let's touch a little bit on the marketing specifically. So we've talked a little bit about that, how we can use clips from your audiobook, clips from your podcast, how we can use the Amplify audiobooks platform and tools to be able to start to get those components working together. Now let's add in social media. Social media gives you the opportunity to utilize those clips to help your customers find you. Social media is generally not great for actually selling books. So just approach it with that understanding. Generally, you're not going to be selling a lot of books as a result of social media. What you are doing is that you are building your audience through visibility. You're providing content that people want, and as a result of that gift that you're giving, they're going to be drawn to you and other content that you have. It's a great way to find podcast listeners. Then, as they listen to your podcast, what's happening? They're getting exposed to you more as a thought leader, as somebody that they are interested in learning more about, and they may be hearing ads for you, getting discounts available to them for your audiobook on Amplify Audiobooks. And just to be clear, these opportunities also will help sales of your other books, your other formats or other books that you have. It's really about building that audience and giving that audience value. Now, there's another component of marketing that is really valuable, and it works really well with all of these other pieces together, and that is your email newsletter. Now, you may not have any list as you're getting started. That's okay. But social media can be useful in helping to build that list. Your podcast can be helpful in building that list because you're going to create these calls to action. And one of your initial calls to action, if you don't have a big list especially, might be just sign up for your free newsletter. Now, what is that newsletter going to do? That newsletter, whether it's monthly, weekly, whatever schedule you put it on, and you should have some schedule so your listeners will know, your email recipients will know what the schedule is. That email is going to regularly remind people about what you're sharing on your podcast, what that new thing is. It's going to remind people about your audiobook. If you're running a promotion, now that's a great place to let people know about your promotions because they're time sensitive, right? If you're running a sale for, let's say, the week around Valentine's Day, well, you're going to want to let people know in time so it's a good moment for them to buy. That's a good promotion experience. And you can do that best through email. And you can do that through social media as well. So these different components are all integrating with each other so that they're supporting each other and you're able to achieve multiple goals, building your email list, building your visibility, building your sales through some of these pieces working together. Hopefully, you're starting to see how these things can fit. Let's take just a short pause, and we're going to continue talking about how these things all work together and how you have a team that is going to support you with this process. Here at Pro Audio Voices, we love working with authors who have a big goal in mind. They really want to reach out to their audience around the world. We're here to help make that happen. It starts with our pre-production process, where we're evaluating and determining what elements of the audiobook we can leverage to both create an excellent listener experience for your listeners as well as drawing them to your website to engage with you further. It continues on through the production process, making decisions that will enhance and support your big goals, as well as creating a great listener experience. But we don't stop there. Once the audiobook is live, we move on to helping you market your audiobook with the Audiobook Marketing Program. Come check us out at proaudiovoices.com. To schedule a call to talk about your audiobook project, click on Get Started. Okay, before we start talking about the team element of how this all works, I want to cover a couple things I haven't yet. One is about distribution of your podcast. So that is also important, and it's really best to be in as many channels as you can be, right? Again, being where people are looking for content like yours, all right? The other element I haven't talked about is events. These can be online events or they could be in-person events. But these events are opportunities both for, and now we're going to talk about that integration of these components. You can use your social media and your podcast to help promote the event. And you can use the event to help promote both following on social media, but mostly your audiobook or other formats of your book, yourself as an author, your services, etc., and your podcast. Getting people from the event onto your email newsletter, that would be your number one call to action. You can, as well, use other tools in the event, other offerings, for example, a discount on your audiobook. These are other things that you can do. So you want to look at what your goals are for the event overall and how then to best place your calls to action so that your followers, your listeners, your attendees know what you would like them to do. No one's forcing them, of course, but it's an offering. It's a gift. You're creating all of this experience and content as a gift. And the reward that you receive is that people follow you and get your book and your audiobook and are a part of the community that you're building. Now, speaking of community, I want to talk about team. How all of this strategically works together to achieve your goals. And it is a strategic, overall, thoughtful integration. The way that this works best is to have a team that knows how, that already works together and knows how to integrate these pieces with each other. The reason that works best is, and you've probably had an experience like this, where you get a couple people and they've never worked together before, and then there's this time period of them trying to figure out how they work together well. There's process that has to be figured out. There's communication styles. Some communication styles work well between people. Sometimes one person has a different style and it's awkward, and then there's misunderstanding, and then you end up just with a kind of a mess. When you have a team that is already established with all the different components, and they're familiar with how they integrate together, how they can integrate together, and then that team works with you as your team and customizes your particular goal and audience and content and works strategically together, then what you get is you get this smooth experience, not held up by communication differences or uncertainty or lack of trust or any number of other things that can come into play. We recognized the great value that can be offered by having a team that knows how to work together well, is enthusiastically passionate about helping authors deliver their messages out to the world and to build their followings and to build community and to collaborate together. These are, there's so many of our core values at Pro Audio Voices that are built in, that are just expressed, maybe I should say, These core values that are expressed through this integrated approach to production, distribution, and marketing of audiobooks and podcasts. The other great benefit of having a team that is established and works together in all these different arenas to pull all these pieces together is it generally is more cost effective because the team is working as a whole. So you're not getting overlaps of certain things where, let's say, if you're working with one company that's doing one thing and an individual that's doing another thing, and they have overlapping services, then you can run into some challenges around, well, who's going to do that piece? There can be a little push and pull, a little discomfort. And so we want to avoid that. We want to just have a team that works well together. It also can save you time in terms of meetings. Just who do you meet with and how is that information then disseminated to the team? Or do you have to have a meeting with every single team member to make sure that they're clear on what the other person is doing? You see how your time can quickly get sucked up and used up when you have disparate members or disparate team members that are not used to coordinating with each other and working together. Now, can you potentially build such a team? Of course, you certainly could. Is that how you want to spend your time? Maybe, or maybe not. What I would propose to you is that if this approach, this integrated approach, where each piece of the production, distribution, and marketing puzzle for your audiobook or your podcast or both, if this is something that sounds appealing to you, that you would really love to have working for you and your projects, especially if you have more than one book, you see, the advantage grows. The more books you have, or the more services you have to offer, the more advantageous it is to have this kind of integrated approach, because you're giving your customers more potential ways to connect with you and to experience the benefit of connecting with you. The more you have to offer, the more they have to gain. And you see, you can then see how that value relationship is beneficial on both sides of the equation. So to wrap this up, there is tremendous value and benefit to be gained from taking an integrated approach to the production, distribution, and marketing of your audiobook and or podcast. And I would love to encourage you, if this is something you'd like to explore, and to work with a team that already knows how to work together smoothly and strategically, who understands, then I encourage you to visit us at proaudiovoices.com and schedule a call. It's a free call. Let's talk about your project and what you would like to achieve. What are your goals? And let's take a look and see if we might be able to assist you in reaching your big goals and beyond. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope that it is providing value for you, and I would love to talk with you. So please visit us at proaudiovoices.com. And let's make some audiobook and podcast production, distribution, and marketing magic happen for you. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.